This is 5-Minute Power Platform, and today we're using Power Platform to build a split flat board. What is a split flat board? It's this cool kind of readout where they've got letters on spools, and the spools will spin until it reaches the right letter. So it's kind of an old style digital display. What's nice is they work in sunlight. They are relatively complex, which is why you see fewer and fewer of them, but I always thought they were fascinating. And I thought I was uniquely nerdy about these until I posted it to Twitter, and it found out lots of people thought these were cool. So I guess that's an upside to social media. These guys at Oat Foundry actually built one that you can buy, and thought, well, that'd be a cool thing to build in Power Platform. And so luckily they gave me the sound of one of their spindles spinning, so we have a nice realistic sound for the one we're about to build. And this is also a great use for Canvas components. And Canvas components are an ability to group things in Canvas so you can reuse them. It's often used for navigation like this, side navigation, so that you could have it the same in every place. You could have this group have properties and all that. And so that's what we're going to use to build this. It's often confused with PowerApps component framework, which is a different technology, although related for custom UI. We're going to use Canvas components, which are a grouping of Canvas controls. And this is the first of two videos. In this first one, we're going to build this part where you can use an input control, text input control, and feed data to the split flap display. And in the next one, then we're going to use Flow then to pick up things from Twitter, from Teams, and from Outlook, so that you can automatically update it based upon what's going on in the world around you. Okay, so let's start here, and we're going to create a new Canvas app from blank. We'll call this split flap. It's going to be a tablet-sized one. Now, one of the first things we're going to do is, once this is all ready, is we're going to turn on components. They're still in preview. It's been a while, although they have been improving, and one of the improvements is actually something we're going to use in this app. So once this loads, I'm going to go in here into Advanced Settings, scroll down to the bottom here, and turn on Components. Components, like I said earlier, is like a grouping that you can set properties on and all that. So while we're in here, let's set the screen name. It's always a good practice. You want real words with spaces in them. And then over here, now that we turned on components, we have this components tab. And so first thing before, let's load up our media that we're going to need. And so here in media, I can browse, and I've got a folder that has all of my animated GIFs and such. Mostly PNGs, one animated GIF. And you'll see them here in a sec. So here's all the PNGs I loaded. So this is every letter that we're going to show. And then we've got this animated one for when it's flipping. We just put that one up on the screen. It's kind of a cheat, but it works pretty well. A quick note on how the Canvas components are going to work. So it's going to be a stack of 3 images. At the base is going to be a blank image in case it's a space or a character that we don't have a PNG set for. And then on top of that is going to be the actual letter that's going to show. And so we're going to control visibility of that if we can set the letter. And then on top of that is going to be an animated GIF that shows the flipping. And we'll control the visibility of that one too, based upon if we're flipping or not. And that last one's actually going to be assigned to the audio control too, because those can actually have images as well. So why add another image control if the audio control can do that as well? And so all together then, when they're stacked on top of each other, it'll look like this. We'll show the letter, make that one visible, and we'll make the animation visible or hide it, depending on where we are. Now we have a lot of PNG files for this, and these are going to be indexed in this collection that looks like this. And so what we're going to do here is, if the input letter is an A, then we're going to map that to the actual image for A as well. And then down below too, we've got some down at the very bottom, we've got some that are named for, if it's like a slash, then it's the word slash, because you can't have an image file named slash. We're going to use this about halfway through, and that's how we're going to index between the input letters and the actual images. So now let's create a new component. So this is going to be our split flap letter. And let's also then resize it to the size of each one of those PNGs, which is 82 by 117. Make the fill transparent so that it blends in with the background of the screen it's on. Let's zoom in a little bit here. And let's create a property. The property is going to be the letter we want this to set itself to. So display name letter, we'll call it letter, and the description is the current letter. It's an input one of text, and this is important here. This is one of the new features. We want to raise on reset when this changes, and that will then allow us to respond to this and start flipping. So now let's then add an image on here. This is going to be kind of our background image. There aren't background images on components, so that's a label. So we're going to add an image on here. Here we go, image. Drop it over here, and we're going to set this one to the blank image. So that's just going to be our background. Similar to before too, let's set the background to transparent. And we're going to do something important here too. Let me show you when we add this onto our screen. So we add the component in here. Just remember that components are resizable. And so now here on the screen, if I resize this, The component resizes, but the image doesn't. So we need to make some changes here to make sure that that image knows how to resize itself. So the first thing we do, well, let's rename this here, image blank. Let's set the height equal to the height of the component. And so split flap letter, it's going to be the height of that. And then the width of that as well, it's going to be split flap letter width. And now when we come back here to the screen, we'll see that it's resizing a little better. All right, it's keeping its proportion though. So we want it to stretch so it actually takes up the full space. And so then we'll take this image and we'll set the image position to stretch. And now when we come back here, you can see it's stretching. So it behaves a little more like we would want it to. So now coming back to our component here, let's copy and paste the blank image. And we'll call this one image letter. This is where the letter is going to show. We're going to do separate images for that. And because I copy and pasted it, those height properties and all that are stored too. So now these will both have all of the properties of the first one, including the transparency, it should at least. So now we have our letter, and how this is going to work is this one is going to show like a letter or a number there. So that's the actual value that we're showing. I've just hard-coded that one in here. We're going to do a lot of work to set those dynamically here in a sec. So now the component has an on reset property, and this is going to be called every time the letter is changed. And so we're going to do a lot of our work here. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to reset the var animating. Right? It keeps track of whether or not it's animating. So we're going to set this to false every time it resets because we may not need to animate. Maybe it's the same letter. And then let's grab the new letter from the property. And we're going to do some cleanup here, some hygiene. We're going to say uppercase it. And in case they put in more than one letter, just take the left one. And then we'll say split flap letter property, and just take the first one on the left. So we're going to grab the very first letter. We're going to uppercase it. And that is going to be the new letter. One thing to know, these variables are private to the component. You can kind of see that here. If we go look at variables, you see that they're scoped here by the component. The letters from the rest, or the variables from the rest of the app will be in a separate chunk. And so when we create multiple of these components, they'll each have their own variable space. Now let's add in a timer, which is an input control for some reason. So we'll call this flip. This will be how long it takes to flip. We'll drop this at the bottom. We're going to get rid of it here. And I like my timers, if I'm not going to show them, I like just to show the value in the text. Let's not show seconds. Let's actually see what this thing is doing. So now we'll see the actual counter of that. Now for the duration of this, what we're going to do is we're going to set it to be half a second plus then some random number times 2000. So this will give us then between half a second and 2.5 seconds randomness. That means they'll all flip independently, which is how they would in reality. In reality, they flip independently because it's going across a spool of letters to find the next one, which could be a short or long distance. Ours, we're going to kind of fake it, just kind of get the feel of it. Now, when the timer ends, what we'll do then is we'll set our current letter, set var current letter equal to var new letter. And so basically we're going to assign that variable based upon the new letter. We're going to make that the letter that we're setting, and we're going to turn off the animating variable. And so that kind of locks that in. The timer itself is going to start when the animating variable is true. So this starts whenever we're animating. So then that'll start counting up, and then when it lands, it's going to set that letter. Now, one thing we need to do back in our on reset for the component itself is we also want to say, look, if the old and new letter are the same, don't animate. And so we'll say only if var current letter is different than var new letter, then set var animating to true. Otherwise, it's just going to sit there and say, yeah, they're the same. No big deal. Okay, so now let's go to the part where we actually set the letters. Now, all the letters are controlled by that JSON I showed you at the beginning, and here it is again. So basically, this is a mapping between all the images we just loaded up and the letters we could have. And this is especially important because things like colon and things like this, you can't name an image like that. And so we're going to have to map between the letter that gets typed in into the letter that can be shown. And so what I'm going to do is copy this. Rather than put that in our reset and have it get reset over and over again, we have access to all of the variables that are as part of the main app. And so as part of the app on start, we'll just load this up once. And so there we go. And so now in our image letter, we can set the image based on that. And so instead of hard-coded number 7 there, what we'll do is we're going to look up in that collection of letters where the letter equals our current letter variable. And then we're going to take the image out of that, and that is going to be our image. So let's test this out. Now before we test it out, we actually have to run the onStart, and that's going to set that collection. So now let's test this out by adding in a control here. So here's our component. Let's insert an input box. And then we'll have this thing feed itself. So we'll set the letter equal to be the text input control, the actual text property. And since we're already taking the left one, we really don't need to do any more math than that because we're just going to take the first letter. So set it to C, and it's set to C. Did some funny things there with the bumping up. Move to D. Let's do this. Let's reset the visibility on that timer since we don't need it. And let's see if that resolves some of that weird motion. Good. So the timer's running in the background. We can't see it, but it did land on the right letter. So now we just need to add the animating in front and the sound. One of the things that's interesting about the sound component here, sound control, audio. Let's name this audio flip sound, is that they can have images too. So I just use this to show the flip image. Why not? And so let's do this. Let's set our media. There's the sound from Oat Foundry for their cool real life split flat board. And then we'll make the same changes on this that we made on our other controls. So we'll set it to clear background. We're going to hide the controls because we're not actually going to do a play on this. We're going to tie the height and width just like we did before. So we'll set the height equal to the split flap letter height, and we'll do the width equal to the split flap letter width. And then let's see, let's also set the image to stretch. So we've got an image property on here. And that's going to be our flap animation. That's that animated GIF we have, flap animation. I don't know why it's not finding it, but there it is. And our image position is going to be stretch. And so then that should set that up. Now we just need to say when do we want the audio to start and when do we want it to stop. And so we'll set the start property of this. We want it to start on two things. And this is one I found that was kind of a startup condition that I had to handle. Well, of course, whenever it's var animating is true, we want this to show. But also I found that I had to control it off the timer. So when T flip, the value is greater than 0. And so we'll grab this and we'll say that is when it's supposed to start, and that's also when it's supposed to be visible. And so that way it'll show the image and play the sound for us when that's true. So now if we come back here, and we should be able to resize this and see it all looks good as well. Now let's set it to G. Now we get our flip. Now it stops on G, A, and if we blank it out, it goes back to blank, just like we'd want. Okay, so now let's hook this up so that we can actually put a message in it. So let's set our main screen. We'll give it a background color. We'll give it a background color of 73, nice gray color. That's a color line people love, gray. And we'll put on a button here that's going to set the text. I'm going to do this in kind of a weird way. We're going to use this to set a variable because that's going to come in handy in the next spot of the setup when we start to bring in flow. And so on this, we're just going to do set var message equal to whatever text input is. Text. And then let's drop some of our controls on here. So there's one. Copy and paste another. And another. And another. Looks like those are about sized right. And then we'll grab all of these, copy and paste a group of 4, and another group of 4. It'll give us 12. Let's center these a little bit here. And we'll copy and paste the group of 12, and another group of 12. So now we have to tie each one of these to this message variable that we set up here. And so what's going to happen here is I put in a message. I hit set text, and that's getting assigned to a message variable here, test. And so we need to tie each one of those, not to the text box, but to that message variable. And that's part of the setup for the next one. So what we're gonna do is for the letter, we're gonna use the mid function to pick out the first, second, third letter of that. So we'll say from var message, start at 1 and pick out 1 letter. So that's gonna be the letter for this one. So now if we test that here, let's put in hello, and the first one finds its way. So the next part is a little tedious. We're gonna take this formula here, we're gonna highlight all of them, and we just paste them all in there, and that'll set up all those properties, hit enter key. But we still need to move this 1 digit over. This is gonna be the second digit, it's gonna be the third digit, fourth digit, and so on. I'm gonna speed up the video for this part here. It's a little boring. All right, we're back. Let's give it a sentence here. This is a split flap power app. Set the text. And we see if we change like one letter too, we change this one to B, we see only that one letter changes, not everything. And so we could say that, and we'll see just these 4 change. Just those 2 change because the TH was the same. And so with that then, we used Canvas components, we built a component, we reused it 36 times, and then control it off of this. So you could have got your own split flap board that you can control off of text. Now in the second video then, we're gonna use Flow and model driven app, or at least CDS, to tie it into multiple data sources so it'll automatically update itself.